Shadow Generations has been out for 1 year now, and ever since its release, people have hailed it as the peak of 3D Sonic games, saying it's the best game in the franchise and whatnot. And while I do agree that the game is good, I've never ever agreed with the statement that it's the peak of 3D Sonic or the best game in the franchise and everything like that. And I think it's finally time for me to explain why I believe so in a video, because I think Sonic Team can do so much better than Shadow Generations, and they already have it in the past. So with the sequel to Sonic Frontiers being the next big game in the franchise, it's time to explain why Shadow Generations just isn't as good as people make it out to be. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let's discuss the topic at hand. Starting things off, we have the movement in Shadow Generations, where I don't think it's all too great. I genuinely think Shadow Generations has some of the most boring movement in a Sonic game, period. I know this game is actually very easy to control, but honestly, I think that's the problem. I feel like Sonic games are never supposed to be easy to control. They're supposed to be easy to learn to control, but never just easy on its own. And I think that's a big part of Shadow Generations' boring movement for me. There's no way for you to mess it up because of the lack of momentum, which has been carried over from Sonic Frontiers, but they've made the problem even worse here because of the fact that even things like rail launching have been removed from Sonic Frontiers in this game, unless of course you do the neutral stick technique where if you don't move the stick in any direction then jump in this game while boosting, Shadow actually retains all momentum for some reason. But of course this only applies in one direction because of course moving to try to turn means that you're touching the stick and then you lose all momentum again. Another problem I have with this game's movement as well is the fact that it's just so slow. This is by far the slowest boost game in the series, and my god, you really feel it in this game. Comparing the beginning of Sunset Heights in this game to the original Enforcers really just shows you how much slower Shadow has gotten since then. And for a boost game, I think that the speed is part of what makes it so fun. Trying to maintain the character speed that high all the time is what makes it so good and so fun, but if it's so slow like it is in Shadow Generations, a lot of the fun just disappears so quickly. It also doesn't help that a lot of his moveset is kind of boring. Compared to Frontiers, stuff like the stomp bounce is just gone, which I don't know why they removed that. It's such a good move, and like there's no light speed dash here. No drop dash makes sense because it's Shadow. Even his air boost is really stunted as well. It's really crap. Instead of speeding you up in the air, it just makes you go so slow compared to like Unleash and Generations, and heck, even Forces had a pretty decent air boost. Frontiers' air boost is a bit weird though, because it's actually surprisingly a bit momentum based. If you air boost when you have a lot of speed in Sonic Frontiers, the air boost length actually increases. But in Shadow Generations, no matter how fast or slow you're going, the air boost always goes at the same speed. And it kind of just ruins the flow of the entire moveset, honestly, because you're constantly just having to stomp every single time you air boost because it's so slow. And of course, this isn't Sonic Unleashed where stomping retains some momentum. No, you come to a halt every single time you stomp, which just ruins the flow completely. Now, the saving grace for this game's movement apparently is not even intentional, but rather an exploit, which is the Chaos Spear Dash. If you spam the Chaos Spear button in the air, you retain any speed you had before, meaning if you have enough speed, you can pretty much skip entire chunks of the level, and while that might sound cool to some people, to me personally, I just don't see the appeal. It's the same reason I hate things like homing dash in Sonic Frontiers, M speed and D speed in Sonic Unleashed and Generations. You're just skipping over parts of the level. Now, skipping over parts of the level is nothing new for Sonic, especially in the classic Sonic games, but the difference between those games and the Chaos Spear Dash in this game, for example, is the fact that there's no skill involved in the Chaos Spear Dash compared to the skill involved with the classic games doing it. In the classic games, you have to know the level inside and out to be able to pull it off by bouncing on enemies and stuff like that, but in Shadow Generations, you see a dash ring or something, sure, just spam the Y button and boom, you're skipping entire parts of the level, just like that. Wow, so skill-based. I find so much more fun and satisfaction by playing the levels normally in this game, and when I do skip parts of the level, it's not because, oh, I spam the Y button or something, wow, so skill-based. It's because of knowledge of the level and the game's actual normal base moveset that I use to skip it all. And if people are really going to try and use an exploit in this game to say that, yeah, this game controls fine, then no, the game doesn't control fine because you're using an exploit to make it apparently better. I'd say an exploit in a Sonic game which actually makes the game better is QSS in Sonic Unleashed. And the reason for that is simple. When you're doing QSS, you are still on the ground interacting with the level. In fact, I'd say using QSS is actually a lot more skill-based than just playing it normally, because you're experiencing the level at such a higher pace than usual, meaning you've got to be a lot quicker with your reaction skills. And I simply just can't say the same for the Chaos Spear Dash because you're going going over the level. You're not going through it faster, no, you're just skipping over it entirely. So yes, I truly believe that the movement in Shadow Generations is honestly some of the most boring movement ever in a Sonic game. But of course, there's more to gameplay in a Sonic game than just movement, there's also the level design part of that, so let's talk about it in this game, shall we? And yeah, I just don't think it's once again as good as people make it out to be, up until a certain point. In terms of the 3D levels in this game, I don't think they're anything special up until you reach Chaos Island Act 1, because once you reach Chaos Island, the game actually shows you something called 3D platforming. Kind of. It's not fully realized, I'd say, in Chaos Island Act 1, there's remnants of it in there, but when you reach Radical Highway, that's when they truly say, yep, here's your 3D platform they've been missing the entire game. And it's not like there's zero 3D platforming at all up until Chaos Island, there's still some parts of it in there, but the problem is, just like Forces, just like Sonic Frontiers, you can always avoid just doing it by a simple homing attack chain. Shadow Generations' level design is nowhere near as big as an improvement over Frontiers that people make it out to be. Every single problem with 3D Sonic that's been here since Forces, and heck, even Sonic Unleashed Generations technically with all the rails and stuff like that, is still here in Shadow Generations. The biggest asset I think this game has with its levels is the fact that they're no longer 1 minute long anymore. We actually have decently length levels now. And just that alone does make it a big improvement over previous games, but the fact that the level design itself still isn't that big of an improvement really stops me from saying this game is truly peak. But yeah, in terms of 2D though, I will say 2D is a lot better than 3D for the most part in this game. Again, up until Chaos Island, the 2D acts in this game really do slap. Sunset Heights 2D, Kingdom Valley 2D, both some of the best levels in the game. I'd even say Kingdom Valley and Sunset Heights 2D are better than the 3D counterparts of the levels because the 2D levels just have more platforming and engaging level design in general. And once again, this isn't really anything new for Sonic games, I feel like, up until this point, because Forces, 3D usually is very bare bones, but 2D is usually where the game shines in terms of actual engaging gameplay. So barring the improved length in this game of the levels, what really does this game do better than any Sonic game previously? I don't think there's any improvement at all. Once again, like I said though, up until Chaos Island, and Chaos Island even still has some of the problems of just homing attack chains over and over again, but Radical Highway is where the game truly does shine in terms of its 3D platforming and proper level design. Well, that is if you don't use the Doom Wings, I will say. Playing Radical Highway Act 1, Act 2, and even Space Colony Arc Act 2 without the Doom Wings makes the stages so much better in my opinion, because using the Doom Wings skips over all the platforming and interesting level design. And I wouldn't mind it as much if the Doom Wings themselves had the interesting level design to accommodate with it, but they really don't. The most interesting part about the Doom Wings' level design is that you gotta keep rings to stay flying in the air, and that's really it. Which is why not using them in these 3 aforementioned levels just makes the game so much better as an experience. When I played the first minute of Radical Highway Act 1 without any Doom Wings, I genuinely see some pretty great Sonic level design there because of the 3D platforming here. The amount of shortcuts that are in here and things you can do by just using the base movement of the game is exactly what I wanted to see for the entirety of this game. If the entire game was just like the first minute of Radical Highway Act 1, I would have completely understood people saying that, yeah, this is honestly peak 3D Sonic because, yeah, it's just really good design, man. Really good design. 3D platforming, difficulty, everything is there. But the sad fact is that they wait until the final level in the game to start finally ramping up the level design. And even though I do enjoy Radical Highway Act 1 and 2 without Doom Wings, again, they can still do better than this, and if this kind of level design was way earlier in the game, they could have built upon this even further in the later half of the game with this stuff, and it could have genuinely been some of the best level design in this series, even being on par with the original Sonic Generations, which I think is the peak of 3D Sonic level design. And you know what I enjoy so much about Radical Highway, apart from the level design itself? It's the fact that you can't use Chaos Control. Shadow's main power-up in this game, you can't use it in Radical Highway segments throughout the game, and I think it's better off without it because of the simple fact that Chaos Control stops time in this game. It stops it for 5 whole seconds whilst you're using it, and of course because this is a Sonic game after all, that means that the speedrunning side of this game goes completely ballistic with this idea. Instead of taking all the fastest pathways in this game just to get a normal time, what we instead like to do in this game, or rather I don't like to do in this game anyways, but we still have to do it, is route through each of these levels to take out enemies because those are the things that refill the Chaos Control gauge. And this usually means all the level design that means going on the top pathways the fastest usually does not apply here anymore, because a lot of the enemies are usually on the bottom pathways, and it once again brings down my experience of Shadow Generations. Because the simple act of destroying an enemy in this game is not interesting in the slightest because all it comes down to once again is a simple homing attack. So instead of actually using your skills to stay in the top pathway in these levels now, we're instead going to go to the bottom pathway and spam the homing attack over and over to kill enemies. Yay, how engaging. If the act of killing enemies in this game was more than just a simple homing attack, I would have been more on board with the idea of going for Chaos Control routing in this game, but yeah, it's just not. It's just Yes, it's really boring, honestly. Which is why, once again, Radical Highway, despite my hatred of its usage in this game because it appears so often ruining the flow of levels, does do something right by just eliminating the use of chaos control here. Now, since we're on the topic of Radical Highway in this game, it's probably a good time to mention the mid-level cutscenes. This is once again another aspect which kind of ruins the whole speedrunning aspect of this game, because these mid-level cutscenes aren't skippable. You have to watch these things every single time, and while they do look cool and are animated very well, I just don't want to see them every single time. The worst example of this has to be in the DLC level Tokyo, where the amount of mid-level cutscenes in this level takes up a third of the 3-minute runtime, and that is just ridiculous. How could you ruin the idea of replayability in a franchise built around the idea of replayability? And do you want to know something about all the QTEs in this game? Well, all except the first one that appears in the game in Space Colony Arc Act 1, you cannot fail any other one. That's right, if you just simply don't press the button for any of these QTEs after Space Colony Arc Act 1, the game still proceeds without any consequences. That even means in the final boss of the game, all those QTEs that appear, if you just put the controller down and don't interact with the game at all, you will still beat the boss. Even Sonic Forces, well, except for the double boost in that game, allows the player to fail QTEs. Sometimes it results in death, or ending up on a lower pathway, or even just a cool little animation. But in Shadow Generations, no, throw it all away and boom, you end up with this game not allowing you to fail any QTEs, so like, what's the point of them being there? I just don't understand why they allow you to fail the QTE in the first level and then never again. If you're not going to allow us to fail the QTEs in Sonic games, just don't have QTEs in Sonic games. It doesn't help that the QTEs itself are just so unengaging because it's always just one simple button press and that's it. In Sonic Unleashed, where they had QTEs in that game, it's always a different button every single time. And they always save the QTE cutscenes in this game for the boss fight specifically, never in a level, because they understood that, yeah, we're going to be wanting to replay these levels, and if the QTE's in here, that's going to kind of tarnish that experience. But then here's the thing, even they understood how to do this properly, because in Space Colony Arc Act 2, when you've played that level for the first time in your playthrough, a mid-level cutscene appears where Shadow gets taken over by the Doomwings and then actually activates them. But then going back to that level after you've beaten it, guess what? The mid-level cutscene isn't there anymore. So like, what were they doing? Generally, what were they doing with the cutscenes in this game? The solution was so easy, and they even did it, but they don't do it every time. Sonic Team, I guess. It's a Sonic Team. And then for my final talking point of today's video, it is to do with game progression in this game. Replaying this game is such an absolute slog compared to any other Sonic game, I feel like. It's no secret this game doesn't have much content, to be honest. I mean, 7 zones with 2 acts each and then a couple boss fights. It's not the biggest Sonic game in the world. And the reasoning for that is they make all the side content in this game main content, just like Sonic Colors. And what's weird is that Sonic Generations, the game in the same bundle as this game, doesn't have this problem. Sonic Generations has 90 missions in the game total, yet in order to beat the game, you only have to do 9 of these missions. And that increases replayability of Sonic Generations, in my opinion, 10,000-fold, because now there's no set route for you to beat the game. If you don't like a certain mission in this game, then you don't have to do it. You can go do another one that you find more comfortable to be playing. But as we turn to Shadow Generations, all these missions that were not mandatory in Sonic Generations are now mandatory in Shadow Generations. So now, as opposed to the 9 you have to do in Sonic Generations, you now have to do 24 missions in this game. And this is bogs down the replay of this game so heavily because, in my opinion at least anyways, these missions are just consistently mediocre. You've got some pretty good ones sometimes, but you've also got some really boring ones, and it just overall just leads to a bogging down of a playthrough. This is one of the biggest evidences of them trying to pad out the game, just like Sonic Colors, making all the extra content in the game mandatory. And it was bad in Sonic Colors, and it's even worse in Shadow Generations. And what's funny is that I don't even see anybody complaining about this issue. People always like to hog on about Sonic Colors having 6 acts, but technically so does Shadow Generations, because every area except for Radical Highway has 2 acts and then 2 missions for each act, meaning that technically you have 6 acts per level in this game. And I find it worse than Sonic Colors because at the very least in Sonic Colors, some of these levels have interesting gimmicks, but in Shadow Generations, kill a certain amount of enemies or go through a set amount of dash rings, which are all automation based, mind you. Again, you got some decent ones in there. I think the 2D Kingdom Valley ones are actually very, very solid because they required a simple platforming and whatnot, which is fun. But a lot of the ones in this game are just really short and have nothing interesting going for them. Leading to the overall replay of this game, it just kind of sucks, to be honest. If I'm going to play this game again, I'm just going to play through the levels in a complete save file, and that's really it, which is not something I usually do for any Sonic games, really. I can pick up most Sonic games and start a new save file and be fine, but not with Shadow Generations. Not with this game at all. Anyways, yeah, that about does it for today's video. video then. So these are basically the reasons why I find Shadow Generations to be majorly overrated. The movement is boring, the game progression sucks, the level design isn't that much of an improvement over previous Sonic games really, and there's just too many pace-breaking issues I have with this game. Now let it be known, in terms of voice acting, story, presentation, this is one of the best Sonic games in that aspect in my opinion. Kirk Thornton does a fantastic job as Shadow in this game and really makes me get on board with his take on the character. I think this is one of the few games that Ian Flynn truly cooked on in pretty much every single way. I just do wish the story had a bit more time to cook because it is a bit too short for my liking. And yeah, in terms of animation, menuing, just pretty much everything in terms of presentation in this game, it's just all around very, very good. This is definitely the best animation we've seen in the cutscenes in a Sonic game ever, even beating out Sonic Unleashed in my opinion. But let me know your thoughts on Shadow Generations 1 year later. Do you think the game is overrated like I do, or do you think it's actually still peak 3D Sonic? Let me know down below. Love to see what you guys have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, especially that last one. Don't forget to become Unleashed, watching that join button down below. Remember, it's not necessary. And I will see you all next time. Peace.